So, this is Crazy Believe with Nelsa. I'm your host, Nelsa. And today I have a very special guest that I'm going to introduce, Mr. Yermi Kurkus, who is with Yermi Kurkus Consulting, also exceptionally irresistible podcast. And welcome to the show, Yermi. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much, Nelsa. This is exciting. So thanks for having us.
Well, and this is like an unofficial part too, because you invited me to be on your show first. Then we did my show and had a, you know, horrible technical difficulty. And so I'm so grateful and so fortunate that you were willing to come back and do the show for us because I just felt like my audience needed to hear you. Like
Sure.
I just felt like it was wonderful to be graced again with your presence. So, first question up, tell us just a little bit about yourself because I know how awesome and inspiring you are, but tell the audience a little bit about you.
Sure. So thanks again so much for this. You give me another chance is like, wow. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So exciting to spend this time with you and your audience. And so a little bit of background, let's say the 40,000 foot high Yermi Kurkus. So I grew up in Montreal, Canada. And all my life, I've been surrounded by entrepreneurship. So grew up an entrepreneur, we're generation entrepreneurs and stuff like that. Philanthropy was also a big deal for us. So it was always about giving back to others. And just to give you also like a little insight into the journey, what it looks like. So for us in the like how we grew up, my mom, for example, in my particular case, was the one who sat me down to have what's called the talk. And
Mhm.
talk basically is, around 10, 11 years old or so, my mom sits us down and says, well, just for you to know that life is not free. So, so you got to work
That's
for
all.
it. You got to, and that's just something that was a very common conversation to have with, children at young ages, something like around that 10, 11, around that age. And my mom would be just explaining to us what business and what earning a living looks like, just to appreciate life and stuff like this. And so at one point of the conversation, so she said, well, like kids your age typically do lemonade stands. That's their way of getting into entrepreneurship and stuff. So my brain heard, oh, kids do lemonade stands. So so I went around the whole neighborhood. I went around to my community, and all the kids who had lemonade stands, I found a way to somehow franchise them and tell them, I'm going to add value to you and you give me 20% of your business. so so yeah, so my grandmother had a restaurant, for example. So I told my grandmother that, hey, you're getting a Snapple, for example, get an extra case of Snapple, I'll pay you back. And then I would go to those kids and I would say, hey, you don't only have to sell lemonade, you could also sell Snapple. You could also sell candy bars, and you could also sell danishes and donuts and all that kind of stuff. And I was bringing it to them. I didn't charge them for it, but I would take commission on their business, and then I would pay my grandmother back. So I got resourceful in that kind of way. And this is me at such a young age. And my mom gets a whiff of what I'm doing, and she's like, "No, no, 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 no! That's not what I meant. I meant that you start a lemonade stand." And so what I quickly learned about myself was to learn how to collaborate with others, learn how to add value to others, and work smart, not work too hard. I mean, you still have to work hard, but find a smarter way to work. So that's why I like to share this story, and that gives you a little bit of insight into who I am.
Well, and I know when I met you, like you were doing a workshop at the Small Business Expo in Charlotte and talking about this whole notion of happiness in work. And I was so intrigued by the title because I think what you said to your point of, we hear life isn't free. We hear you got to work for what you want. Um, for me, I heard work smarter, not harder. That resonated with me because my dad used to say that all the time. He was always finding ways to be more, I guess, lean, before I ever knew about lean belts and, that whole lean concept in corporate America. My dad was really good at finding ways to improve his process.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, this guy's talking about happiness. That's not something you really hear in
Mm,
terms of work. And so talk to us just a little bit about that concept, because I think that whole exceptionally irresistible and all that, that happiness is a core value from what I saw with you being there with your family. Like you were traveling, like you see most people, they're out with, others, but you don't see them with their families. They're separated for long periods of time. But I felt like, oh, he's not only preaching that to the choir, he's actually living that through his own existence. So where did you come up with that concept, and like what even gave you that notion?
yeah, so that's a great question, and thank you for that. And it was awesome. It was awesome meeting you at
Yeah.
Charlotte. Really great. You definitely stood out there. So I think you're literally the only one I remember. So but yeah, that was great. So the whole idea of the happiness component. So there's three components to what makes a person what we like to call exceptionally irresistible. Um, the three components comes from the idea that first of all, people do business with, and they're going to refer business to people that they know, they like, and they trust. So if you know somebody, then you know what they're doing, you like them, so that's why you think that you're gonna say, hey, this guy, I know, I like him, and I trust that he's gonna deliver on what he promises, and then you're gonna refer business to them, or you're gonna actually want to do business with them. But then I asked the question, well, what gets a person to like you?
Mm,
It's great that you know them, but then the liking component that
right.
eventually leads to the trusting component, but you gotta like that person. And what about that person makes you quote unquote like them? So that's when we discovered that there are three elements that makes us like people.
Mm-hmm.
So people are just nice to be around, right? So that's just, they're fun to be around. And so we have identified the three core, as you said, the one of the core is happiness. So everybody likes to be around the person who's happy, the
Mm-hmm.
person who smiles all the time, the person who's just pleasant.
Right.
And the other two are their attitude and their character. So if they just have a good attitude to them, if they just have a good character, they're treating you nicely, they're speaking to you nicely, stuff like this. These three cores coming together, working together, makes you like them. And
Mm,
then what we say is that it's great that you like them, but we really want you to fall in love with them.
mm-hmm.
And you only really fall in love with people who are just like exceptional and who are irresistible. They're like magnets. You meet them
Right.
and they just attract you right away. So that's where exceptionally irresistible comes in.
Well, when I heard that, I thought, well, are those people like outliers though? Because that's not usually what you see in a lot of work conditions. Like, I always wanted to brighten up every place I worked. I wanted to work in bright spaces. I
Yeah.
wanted to be, bright faces. But
Mhm.
what I started discovering in my work journey was that people stay for money, they
Mhm.
stay for security, but they don't always stay for happiness. Like
Sure.
there seems to be sort of a tipping point. So, like for maybe people who are listening out here who are work leaders or
Mhm.
business owners or people who are getting ready to start their own business, what's one thing that you would say really drives a happy worker or a happy employee or a happy entrepreneur for that matter, so that you can effectively draw in the right people and the right clients, and to really sustain a business and run a business well? How do you get those people, or how do you help those people come back from the dark side, so to speak?
So I think that there's good news right now. I think that the silver lining of COVID was like, let's say the bright side of it was that it really, it really woke up a lot of people in a sense. It really got people to say, to like sit down. They were isolated for a small period of time. They got a chance to get out of that rat race, if you will. They had a little bit of separation from work for a little bit, and they really decided to say, hey, what is this life? And for many who unfortunately, struggled with hardship during that time, it really got them to like look at themselves in the mirror and say, what's this all worth? Life
Right.
life is important, stuff like this. And then it's like, well, if I'm not happy at work, then why go back? Um,
Exactly.
so, but on the flip of it is that this has been a discussion in academia for since the 70s. Like, there's studies about this since the 70s. Remote work is not a new thing. Virtual meetings are not new in that kind of way.
Right.
It's been around for a while. Um, but to answer the question about this thing of happiness, I think that happiness all of a sudden was just shoved to the forefront way faster, with just the past few years that we've been through. Just a lot of the social unrest and just everything, the whole aftermath and all the stuff that we've been experiencing in the last few years. The pursuit of happiness has really, really come to the forefront, and people are just now reassessing, and they're saying, why would I go to work for some guy or some woman or some whoever who's going to treat me, terribly? Why, I don't need this, right?
Right.
And so, we tell a lot of leaders on the leader side, we tell a lot of leaders, you're losing tons of money if you don't pay attention to this. I think it's Gallup who says there's over $1 trillion worth of loss of revenue and what you're going to pay in just the retainment and the attainment
Right.
of this talent, just to hold on to talent today. I work in the real estate world, and in the real estate world, the average agent stays with their firm for only about 18 months. So that's not a long time. And for firms, it's so expensive to go recruit these agents, to go hire, to work with
Right.
them, train them, all that stuff. And that's true now across all the industries. It's very hard to hear of people 5 years or more in a job. It's almost unheard of anymore. When
Well,
for our parents, it was like 20 years on the job,
yeah, like 30,
So,
and then your grandparents, like for me, that was,
mhm,
we weren't necessarily entrepreneurs from the front end, but
yeah,
and grandparents always did side hustles and, always had something going, not just the job that they went to, but really for 30 years,
right,
25 to 30 was nothing.
right,
And now my daughter, who, is in that sort of Y population and those YZs, they're
sure,
they're thinking about being entrepreneurs, like, because they've seen me leave, um, a state position and branch out on my own. They've seen their dad open up his own, business. And
yeah,
so they immediately thinking, I'm leaving out of college looking to think, how can I start my own business? So
right,
that was, I wanted to ask you,
mhm,
knowing with people who are trying to start their own businesses or grow their businesses, what is one of the most important things a person should think about, do, activate before or during starting their own business?
mm. That's a great question, and I think, and I remember also the email that you sent me when we were putting this
Mhm,
all together. You were talking about life, like personal life and
mhm,
professional life, and this goes across the board. And I actually just came back from a speaking engagement, where the topic was the human experience, and
mm,
we tend to forget the human experience, and that directly affects every area of our life. So the number one advice is really to remember that human component of whatever it is that you're doing. You're also human, right? And
right,
part of the human experience is the ups and the downs. So there's going to be good times and there's going to be bad times, and that's just part of the human experience. what we see a lot right now in our society is that there's a wonder drug for everything. You have a headache, go get an Advil. You have whatever, there's a drug for that, or there's a cure for that, or there's and we're very adverse to pain. We're very adverse to suffering, to hardships, to challenges. And that is directly affecting our actual human experience. Part
Mhm.
of the human experience is pain. Part
Right.
of human experience is challenge, hardship. And the idea is really to learn how to channel that for our benefit. And I'm going to share with you a little anecdote of what that actually means, is that in martial arts, for example,
Mhm.
in karate, any form of martial art, you're going to see this across the board, is that an untrained artist will stand there and just get hit. Okay, so let's say a punch comes their way, and they're gonna receive that impact, and it's gonna hurt them.
Mhm.
But a trained martial artist, what they're gonna do is that they know the position to stand in. They have this open position. They're not standing directly in front of their opponent, and when the opponent charges at them, they know how to channel that energy. That means they're using less of their own energy, and
Mhm.
they're learning to harness the energy that's coming towards them and use it to their benefit. So a
Mhm.
trained martial artist knows how to put a person to the floor through that punch, through that potential impact, by
Mhm.
moving away, and all the movements that they do, and the technique and the skill and all
Yeah.
that. And the same thing is true in life. If we just stand there and just allow life to just impact us and hurt us and bash us, we're gonna have pain. But the idea is to learn how to use those energies, those hardships, those challenges. There's lessons hidden within. There's opportunity many, many times. And I could only speak for myself. More times than not, there's a lot of opportunity hidden within what seems to be, you know, if we were to catastrophize what seems to be the end of the world. Okay.
Right.
But there's a lot of opportunity hidden there. And it's all about learning how to harness it and channel it.
And I think that's interesting. Of course, we're gonna go off all those questions I sent you before. Look, the audience is familiar with my interview
Mhm.
style, but say something that piques my brain. Like, that was one of the words that came up today in talking to some friends
Mhm.
about, our challenges in, changing roles and this part of your life. I'm 49, about to, face 50, and, life has dealt several blows to me. But now that I'm an energy worker, I recognize that things can go through, or they can go around, or they can go above,
Mhm. Yeah.
but to just stop with, like you said, the impact, like that's where people get stuck and can't seem to move forward when it comes to like getting knocked down. Businesses, so many businesses closed during COVID, and so many have not reopened, or people have thought about, what am I going to do if office doesn't open back up, or working remotely. Like, there
Mhm.
was so many flip sides to that. In several interviews, I talked to people about the downside of remote work, where it's not just, oh, I get to work from home, because you don't just get to stop at every job what you're doing. Some jobs you had to stay connected to a computer all day, and you can't move from that spot without there being some sort of feedback behind it. So it wasn't all, freedom and glitz and glam the way people thought. And then that isolation that we've experienced from, people having to, stay at home and wear masks and not touch. And so we're coming out of that, I think, slowly but surely. But I often think about the impact energetically to people, and
Mhm.
find joy again in the things that you love to do, whether professionally or personally. How so
Mhm.
many people I've you know worked with now are struggling to find that joy again. And so one of my questions I want to ask you again is, like, for yourself, what gets you through those hard, difficult days? I know several different things. You work with lots of different people. You're a major, uh, just amazing connector. Just seeing the way you've operated with people with the LinkedIn Asheville. I'll throw that out there so people know to look up LinkedIn Asheville and the work that you're doing with, bringing the right people together to create these sort of collaborations.
Yeah.
But what about the downside for Yermi, Kurkus? Like, what
Yeah.
do you do when you hit the hardship?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't get that asked often. So thank you for that. Um, for me personally, it's really I find something greater than myself. That's
Mm,
what I find. That's what at least I find, and I've come to learn over the course of my years. Now, I do come from faith, and that's why it's kind of ironic that you know I it took me time to really tap back into my faith and say, oh, wait a second, that's what that actually means, I have a background. I've worked in the prison system,
mm,
and I worked in the chaplaincy component of it, and I worked with many other chaplains, and we were all one time sitting together. We had an opportunity to sit a bunch of chaplains together and just have a chat. And one of the discussions that came up was, different elements of religion. And I remember the conversation was more like, but there's really a common denominator between
mhm,
all of us. And the common denominator is three things. Number one, we all, on any level, believe that there's some kind of energy or power greater than ourselves.
mhm,
So call it God, call it Jesus, call it Allah, call it Buddha, call it whatever. But we all believe that there's some kind of power that is greater than ourselves.
mhm,
The second component is that we all believe that there's a greater version of ourselves, right? So
mhm,
there's something more to who we are, and we're all striving to reach that epitome or better self, right? So
mhm.
some people call it spirit, some people call it soul, some people call it inner energy, whatever it is, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
and then the last thing is that we all believe that there's some kind of operating system in this universe, let's call it, okay, because we all call it different things, but we all believe that there's some kind of system that operates all this, and that's what connects this higher version of ourself to this higher power. So we need to
Mhm,
tap into that energy, if you will, or the universe or the whatever, to marry these two greater versions together.
mm,
So that's every religion, every, whatever you're gonna call it, believes in this to some degree. And that's
right.
the common denominator that we all have. And that's where we really should be focusing on as a greater society. I see the spirit in you is a very common, thing that people talk about, especially in the energy work
Mm,
world. They talk a
mhm,
lot, tapping into that energy and spirit and stuff like this. And so what I learned is to tap into that higher version, that
mhm,
higher spirit. And I've learned that by understanding that I'm not in control of the world, and my mentor always says, it took me 30 something years to learn that I'm not the general manager of the world or something like that. And I was like, right, like so true, it's so true.
that
And
too.
right. So the moment I learned that not everything is in my control, and there's gonna be the ups and the downs, I know that there's some kind of energy out there that has a greater purpose or a greater good, or there's something out there. There has to be a reason and a purpose that
Mhm,
I'm right now here on this world and experiencing this part of my human experience. And it's just for me to navigate right now. And yeah, things are hard. So okay, that's the season we're in right now. And but at the same time, I don't have to lose myself to that part of the season. I could connect with people like Nelsa. I could connect with other incredible people. And we could even share potentially the hardships we're going through and just say, you know what? Yeah, life is tough, but we're going to get through it. And together we're going to get through it. And let's
right.
maybe put our brains together and see where's that hidden opportunity? Where's that next? What's going on? Because there is going to be, again, the human experience is, the ups and the downs. So maybe now we're in a dip, but that up is coming, right? So
Yes.
at least we're prepared for that next up. but we're better prepared because we built a relationship just now. We invested in our know, like, and trust. We've taken the time, because, when things are busy, I don't have time to call Nelsa every day and say, hey, how you doing? I don't have time. But right now on the down low, Nelsa tells me, hey, are you available next week for an interview? I'm gonna say, sure,
Right.
So it's great.
And building that kind of capital in other people. Like, I always consider myself a servant leader in my other professions. In this one, it's just like, what do I offer? How can I use my base of connection to expose those folks to you and what you offer, and to be able to help serve you on your journey, so that sense of interconnectedness is not lost through all this isolation. Because I think for me, one of the things that I really, when we had to do that shelter in place, I really struggled, because I was a hugger and I still struggle. I know that for some people, that can't happen. So I've begun to be more creative. Like, how do I know that I'm still connecting with people on that human level, so that they feel who I am, they know that I'm genuine, they feel safe in my presence? But that's something that we're not going to do. Like, we're not going to do that part of the human experience together. But that doesn't mean that there aren't all these other creative things, and have to let boundaries of religion, or, my personal indoctrination from my family or whatever, keep me from living a full human experience. And so when I met you and your wife and the baby and everything, and, since then, more members of the family, that was one of the things that really just like glowed brightly to me. Like, these people are out here living such a beautiful, authentic. It's like, when you live your best life, when you're doing the things that are important, and you're doing it in such an authentic, joyful way, it's almost like you give other people permission to live that way too. It's like, I'm not out here, I'm not a freak of nature. Like, there are more people out here who are living life to the fullest. They're doing things to help bring light to humanity. They're doing it with joy. And even in the hard stuff, they're showing up for other people. And so I found that to be so, like, soul reviving after the darkness of the pandemic, so to speak. But not to run off there, because I want to make sure I get these important questions in, because I'm going to confess to the audience, we had done a taped version, and in my blessed assurance, technology challenge self sometimes, I lost it. And it was one of the most humbling but satisfying things for me, that I did not rely on trying to look perfect to you, and I felt accepted enough by you that I could come clean and say, Yermi, I'm sorry, I lost our interview. And it was such a good interview. I can remember telling my mom how excited I was, and she saw the show that you had done with me, and she was like, oh my gosh, that was like a great interview. And when I told her about ours, I was like, I can't wait for you to see his, to hear his interview on the show and to see it. And then I lost it. And that was a really human experience moment for me, because I'm so hard always at cultivating this sense of got it together, like, coming correct, being whatever I needed to be in the situation, and to show up where I felt like I had fallen short for our that second time. I felt a great sense of shame. And the grace you showed me, and we were at that, we're in a public arena with all these people I didn't know, and I stood up and said that. And I don't know where that came from. It's just like, I felt like God was giving me the opportunity to redeem myself to you. And it was important that I did it publicly. But it also made me feel like, you know what, we've held ourselves to such high standards, sometimes impossibly high standards, that we don't have grace for each other. And when you don't, it's like, if I can't have grace for myself, how can I extend it to other people? Or how can I trust that if they didn't show up correctly for me, that I would have grace for them if I never show myself any? And so I just want to publicly thank you for that moment, because I think that was a real game changer for me in this business, because I'm like, there's so many days where I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Am I showing up the way I need to for people? Like, do I really have what it takes? You know, that self-doubt. So we're talking about, you know, moving forward, but what is one thing, like, if you had to say, like, don't start a business without this, what would you say to people that want to be their own boss? And what was the moment that you knew you were ready to be your own boss?
Okay, yeah, that's
You
a heavy question.
can throughout your franchising though.
That's a very, yeah. So the number one thing is being open. Just be open to experience, open to, you know, a lot of people say lead with no and all that kind of stuff. There's a time and a place for that. I'm not gonna say that I say yes to everything, but I like to use the word yes more often than not. Let's put it that way. Yes, how could we make that work? Let's say, you know, how do you suggest we can make that work? I like to focus on the positivity more than the negativity, obviously. So that's why I say being open to experiences, being open to opportunity. For example, you know, hey Nelsa, would you want to come over to hang out with us in this you know, event that we're putting together? It's a networking event and all that kind of stuff. You could have said no. You could have said I'm busy. You could have said I'm tired after the end of the day. Or you could have said, not only did you say yes, but you even brought 3 incredible other wonderful kids with you, like you know, Bryson and what was his
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so beautiful to meet your daughter as well. That openness right there, that's one of the keys to success. You know, my mentor talks about 5 keys to success. Bob Berg, if you ever heard of him, he mentions he has 5 stratospheric, 5 levels of stratospheric success, and the 5th one is that idea of being open to receive. So we're so good at giving, you know, and you're this massive giver, and we could, you know, we all know that already. But we're so good at giving. How good are we at receiving?
I've been some of the
right there.
worst, honestly.
Right?
I'm working on it though. I am working on it.
Yeah, and what most people don't realize, that if we block that receiving part, we're blocking that flow of that giving flow, because a giver needs to give something to somebody who is willing and open to receive it. If I give something and somebody doesn't receive it, the giving experience is blocked.
Right.
And so sometimes we are the actual givers, and sometimes we are the receivers. And in business, for example, I'm giving a person an opportunity to solve a problem. So they have a problem in their business or whatever it is, and I'm giving them the solution. I have to also be willing to receive the payment for said solution. They have to give something back in value. And that makes that business a business. It makes it work, you know? And if one of those elements are not aligned, if I'm not really willing to give all of me when I'm coming and showing up, that person's going to notice it. So they're not going to be willing to pay me. You know, they're not going to be willing to hire me. And vice versa is when I'm just so uptight, like, oh my gosh, I can't release my money and I can't give my money. Well, what ends up happening is that I'm going to be stuck with my problem. Just to give you like an analogy, a good friend of mine, April Spritz, she talks about this, that she's a sales expert, and she gave an example in one of her classes, which is beyond brilliant. You're in an Amazon, you're in UPS, and you're giving back an Amazon return, right? We all experience this at some point. We bought an Amazon, we're going to return it. You have a small little package and you walk into the UPS and you just put it on the counter and you're done, and you're now walking out of this UPS. And in like coming to the door is this older gentleman halfway juggling all these packages with them, and they're overwhelmed with all these packages. And as the amazing giver and just the normal nice person that you are, you automatically open the door, right? That's just the natural thing to do. And offer help. Hey, I have empty hands. You're clearly struggling. Would you like some help with getting those boxes to the counter? And then what does the person say? Oh, no, I'm good. How do you feel? You're rejected, right? You feel like, but then it's like, okay, so struggle. I mean, like, what are you supposed to say, I'm here to be nice and help you. Now, it could be that that person's going to say, oh, yeah, no, for sure, thank you. And you grab a few boxes from the top, and now, both of you are kind of holding, something that you could handle. You bring it to the counter, and all said and done, and you just were this great person. And that person's going to say, wow, how could I ever repay you, or that was so nice of you. Thank you so much, right? And business is exactly the same way. We have a certain something that we're talented in, that we're good at. We all have that. We see other people struggling with said problem. I really genuinely know that I could help somebody with said problem. I offer my help, and that person has the opportunity to accept the help or not accept the help. That ultimately is business. At the end of the day, it's the human experience, right?
Exactly.
And like what you said before, if it's all about the money, if it's all about the free lunch after helping that old guy, because he invited you to a coffee because as a thank you, if it was all about getting a coffee, man, you went through a lot of trouble for coffee,
Right.
But if it was really truly just to help the person, and coffee just happened to come out of that, well, that's a beautiful experience. And you're both walking away with a very, very good feeling. And that's what business should be. And that's my biggest advice for anybody who's starting business, is start seeing yourself as somebody who has a unique gift that's unique only to you. And you're going to hear this a lot. Oh, there's competition in that. Well, maybe there's a lot of people who could help old people to the counter, but maybe your smile is different than any other person's smile. And maybe the way you're going to do it is going to be different. So you have something unique that nobody on planet Earth has. And so you don't have to worry about competition, and just be genuinely, you really, really want to help somebody. And when you help that somebody, the outcome is naturally payment. That's just the natural outcome from that interaction. So, that took me a long time to learn, but eventually I did. And what led me to do that was exactly that. When I was working in the prisons, I was doing great work in the prisons, loved what I was doing. I was doing a lot of impact there, really, really helping a lot of people. But at 33 years old, I suddenly realized that I hit a plateau. This is the highest I'll ever get. And that was scary. And I said, I ended my life, like my life almost is at the end of its career at 33 years old. Doesn't make sense. I feel that I have greater impact to still make. And so I told my bosses, I said, I got to go to the next level. I got to go further. And this is the end of the road for me in this career. I still love you guys, and I'm still, everything's great, but I feel that there's more potential for me. So I left that and I started this business.
Wow. That's a great testimony. I named my business Crazy Believe because it was about having this leap of faith that even though I've never done this before, I was being pushed and urged, and my background is very God-centered, and I don't mind calling God by any other name. The rose still smells as sweet. Whole notion of, can you really redefine yourself and your life's trajectory if you really put faith in that greater power, that there's more? Like, I guess I'm just that person, like there's more. And I want to have these experiences and meet all these people and do all these wonderful things in the world, not for my own ego's sake, but there's just something in me that propels me forward into things. And I guess for me, Crazy Believe was about that. Like, how do I help other people after taking my own leaps of faith over and over and over again? How do you help other people? So for you, Exceptionally Irresistible, like, I just feel like that's some sort of exquisite chocolate or, some sort of gourmand food, something, because that name just floats across your tongue so well.
Mhm.
Like, why exceptionally irresistible?
Yeah. Again, it's being the exception because you are already the exception.
Mm,
So people just really need to tap into that, find their exceptional self. Um,
mhm,
because again, like and I tell this a lot to people that science has finally caught up, but something that we learned growing up in faith is that God has given you everything you need, even before you were conceived. Even before you were conceived, that seed has all its potential hidden within it at some level. And science is now starting to prove that. And the seed eventually develops into a human, eventually develops into who we are today. And we have all that potential in us. And we have all those gifts in us, and we have all that stuff in us. And something that you mentioned, and you said it's so accurate, is that you have this innate drive to do whatever it is that you're doing, right? And I often tell people, I said, well, there's money in carpentry. Why aren't you doing carpentry? And there's money to be made in plumbing. So why aren't you doing plumbing? And there's money to be made in many different industries and many different professions, but you're not doing it. Okay. And you know what? And somebody like me, that I've tried many different things and I just didn't like them. And that's why I encourage a lot of children, just try everything. Try all kinds of industries, try everything. And
mhm,
at some point, you're going to find something you love. And that right there is that God-given talent that only you have. There's only one Nelsa in this entire world, you. And I tell this to people, that the day you were born is the day that the universe said, we cannot exist without Nelsa in us. We need
wow.
Nelsa here. We have to have this Nelsa. This energy has to be, and you are mission critical for the universe's survival. The entire
Mm,
universe is dependent on you being here, right now. And the day you die is when you're mission critical, that the universe cannot continue with you in it. So it needs now to remove you from the equation, right? So in that interim, you like we have a limited time here. Let's make the best impact that we can make.
mm,
Find our true self. Find what it is that we love to do. Make this time the best time ever, and the
mm.
around and the immediate surroundings of us have the impact that we are able to make. And when we start thinking in this kind of way, life becomes more enjoyable. Life becomes exceptionally irresistible.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Last question. So I told you what crazy believe meant for me. What does that phrase mean to you in the work that you do?
It's actually one of my favorite questions. And if you don't mind, I'm actually going to plug my book into this. Um,
Okay.
so, so I'm still working on publishing my book. My book is just about to be published very soon. We do have a waiting list, so I could share that link with you and with your audience if you'd like. Um,
Absolutely.
and so the book is really about breaking through all that noise. If you
Mm,
have a dream, go get that dream, right? Go get that dream. You deserve to be happy. And I like to even say, you're entitled to be happy.
mhm.
However, that entitlement comes with rules and comes with work. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't
Responsibility.
just, yeah, you can't just sit on the couch and just hope happiness is going to find you. Or you
Mhm.
can't just sit on the couch and say, my dream should come true. You have to go out there and go get it. And you have to be a crazy believer to make that happen. You have to really, number one, believe in yourself, believe that you have what it takes to go get. If you could dream a certain dream, then it's possible. You could go get it. And just to give a little sneak peek, the book is called For the Love of Success.
Ooh.
It's what you say when you want to get successful, and you're like, for the love of success, you know?
Mm,
So,
I love
um,
that.
and For the Love of Success is my personal story of how I met my wife, who you actually met. I had an idea of the kind of woman that I thought is best for me. And
Mhm.
so I wrote it down in a 4-page description
Love it.
paper.
Write it down and make
And
it.
Yeah, and so the way it works in my community is that we go to matchmakers, and matchmakers connect us with our potential match. And at some point, I got blacklisted from matchmakers. They just said, you're crazy. This woman doesn't exist. Women are not like this. All that kind of stuff, right? And I said, nah. If I could think of it, I could attract it. And long story short, you met her. so,
And
so
I
so
heard the
the
story.
basic
It's amazing. I won't be a spoiler alert, but it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. So the story is how the principles that I used to drive me to find her, and really how that applies into now. I use these principles in my business. I use it in my life. I use it across the board to achieve many of the dreams that I have. And the reader is at the end of each chapter, the reader's challenged to take those principles and write them for themselves. Write your own For the Love of Success, if you will. Just because it worked for me doesn't necessarily means it works for everybody, but the principles are to be adapted to each individual's journey. And these are universal principles. They work for everybody. Just you have to make them work for you. So this book is to inspire, is to challenge, and is to make you believe that you are crazy enough to believe that you deserve something as amazing. So I hope that answered the question.
Perfectly sewn up with a bow, and also a link for the waiting list for the book. And I will definitely be putting my name on that. I can't wait to read it and see how these things evolving for you, because I know this is not the end for Yermi Kurkus. I know that there is more that is to the story. There's a part 2, part 3, like the insight you said, probably. But thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing your experiences, for being so encouraging and being such a bright light in the world, and encouraging people to live a life full of joy and to live and be and draw all that is exceptionally irresistible. So, Yermi Kurkus, thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you if they want to do, business with you in terms of, consulting or speaking or any of the other things that I know that you do? Because we want to make sure that they have the opportunity, and we'll definitely flash that up for people included in the show notes as well.
Sure, absolutely. So LinkedIn and email, and sometimes WhatsApp also. Those are my 3 areas that I take communication with.
Mhm.
So LinkedIn, it's Yermi Kurkus. I think I'm literally the only person there, Yermi Kurkus. And email is yermi@yermikurkus.com.
Mhm.
And then the WhatsApp number is unless you're going to put it in the show notes, but it's 424-288-9607. So
Awesome.
easiest
And
way to me.
that is, I think I've got that. Look, I've got you on all platforms, so I'll make sure to include for people. But please definitely share the link so that we'll be able to do, our listeners can jump on that waiting list as well, because I know it will not disappoint. You just had such a varied and interesting journey to this place where you are. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it briefly in this interview. And to do it, the do-over is like, oh my God. I know the first interview was so amazing, and we probably could have never created it again. But I want to say that I think this one has surpassed even the last one. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, don't stop crazy believing. Until next time.